So good day, friends. This is Dr. Bob Hamilton, and you have tuned in today to the Hamilton Review, where kids and culture collide. It makes me happy to consider the fact that you're there today listening to the show. I appreciate that. I know that every one of you out there is a busy individual with kids running around doing all the things that parents do, grandparents do. And so it means a lot to me. So thank you for being here. I appreciate that. If you like what you hear, I hope you do. Share it with your friends, your relatives, other people, because the people I bring to this program on a weekly basis are amazing people. They're accomplished individuals who are doing things which are interesting to me, certainly, and I hope interesting to you as well. And today I have the great pleasure of welcoming a PhD in occupational therapy. Her name is Dr. Laura Park Figueroa to the Hamilton Review. So Dr. Park Figueroa, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
So I ran into Laura's name by reading a book written by Katie Bowman. We had Katie Bowman, for those of you who are followers of the show, a couple of weeks ago. She was on. She wrote a book called Grow Wild, and part of that book, one of the little vignettes that was in that book, was written by Dr. Park Figueroa, and we're going to talk about that in a second. But Laura, before we jump to that, I want to kind of back up a little bit and have you tell a little bit about yourself, your background, where you're from, the inflection points that made you who you are today, and what is your passions which are driving you to do what you're doing.
Yeah, well, I won't tell my whole life story, but like a lot of us I'm in my late 40s, I grew up just free ranging in my neighborhood, creek walking, going to the park, like being outside, climbing trees and doing things like that. And as I progressed in my career as a pediatric OT, I realized like not a lot of kids are doing these things anymore. We have a real gap happening in childhood where children are disconnected from nature, disconnected from playing outdoors. Many people, if they're not, they should know about it, are probably familiar with Richard Louve's work, the book that he wrote about children being disconnected from nature, which is, why am I blanking on the title of it now? Do you know the one I'm talking about, Dr. Bob?
I don't, but we can find that title somewhere.
Right here.
Okay.
Last Child in the Woods.
Okay, you know what?
That's the name of it.
Okay, so The Last Child in the Woods, and the name of the author again is Dr.
The author is Richard Louve, L-O-U-V.
Okay, L-O-U-V, Last Child in the Woods.
Yeah, the subtitle is Saving Our Children from Nature Deficit Disorder. So this book came out in the early 2000s, I think, maybe 2008, if I'm remembering right. And he really writes about how children today do not have as much opportunity as we did even one generation ago to play outdoors and to connect with nature. And the more I kind of got into this, I started looking at it in my master's degree in 2015 when I went back to do my master's after working as an OT for about 15 years. And in that process, I decided to take my whole practice outdoors. I asked a few clients if they would, I literally asked them, they knew me pretty well. So I literally asked them, will you let your children be literal like guinea pigs for me and do some outdoor work with them? And they absolutely enthusiastically agreed. So the parents and I and the kids went out. We had a group of about 3 kids to start. And I just kind of experimented, like doing OT outdoors. It was amazing. The very first session, I was like, I don't want to go back inside at all. I was working in schools and working a little bit in privately in a pediatric clinic. And so that year I decided to just go all in or all out, you might say, and take my whole practice outdoors. So first year I did it, I had 2 groups of 5 kids each that I worked with outdoors. And then from there, I started hiring employees, and my business has been going 7 years now. And we have a small team of 4 therapists. Most of them are very part-time. But it's just really exciting to see how this work has grown, because as I was doing this work and enjoying the process so much, I developed a treatment model called the Contigo approach. It stands for Connection and Transformation in the Great Outdoors, and then started training other therapists to do that. So now there have been over 100 people that have taken the Contigo approach training, and it's like my mission now to help therapists get outdoors with kids because I've just seen how powerful it can be for the children and the families. So
So,
yeah.
so we're gonna get into this outdoor idea because I love this idea tremendously. But let me back up a little bit and ask you, why did you go into OT originally?
Yeah, that's a good, I was one of those people in college who didn't really know what I wanted to do, honestly. And I started out like doing a general degree like communication, just because I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I like to talk and write. That was literally my thought process around having a major in communication. And within the first year, I started to be of college, I started to be drawn towards health related professions. So I looked at nursing a little bit. I started doing observation hours at a local hospital thinking I wanted to do physical therapy. And I found myself at the clinic where I was observing at the hospital, more drawn towards what the OTs were doing. I was just more interested in it. And I got to observe both. And so then switched my major to OT and ended up majoring in OT and haven't looked back since. I've been so grateful for my career. It is occupational therapy is such an amazing profession because we have such a broad scope of practice to really impact so many different kinds of people. And it looks kind of different depending on who you're working with. So you'll never get bored if you're an OT. That's what I
Yeah,
always say.
it's interesting because PT, physical therapy, and occupational therapy are very different birds. So give
Mhm.
us a little bit of the range of different things that you actually deal with in OT, as a, in terms of the issues that people come to you for help in.
Yeah. So, occupational therapist, I just define it as we help people with the things that occupy their time, the things they need or want to do in life. So, there's a lot of ways that can look clearly because we work with the whole lifespan, right? From birth until death. With children, which is what we're focusing on this in this discussion on this podcast, we're really looking at the occupations of childhood and what occupies children's time. The things that occupy children's time are playing, social participation, being with their friends, being social, daily living tasks like doing chores at home or going to community outings with their family, church or school, education. All of the things that children need to do in daily life are what we look at as OTs. And when we look at those things, the thing that I think really sets OT apart from other professions is we're very holistic, like looking at the child themselves, looking at the context or the environment around them, and also looking at all the tasks that they have to do. And then we're assessing children's skills, their underlying skills, in order to see where those developmental gaps are and how we can help support them to develop the skills they need in order to be successful doing those tasks in daily life. And also looking at how we can modify the environment as well, because that's a big piece. I think sometimes we think we have to fix a child, and really sometimes the environment is the thing that is disabling for a child, right? It's not even necessarily the child. So um yeah, that's kind of our perspective is very global and looking at all of child development and trying to kind of problem solve the mystery of why a child might be struggling in some way.
I can see your passion, and you're
Yeah.
right. The OT, it covers a lot of bases, and I guess that I would say
Mhm.
that my observation is that every child, every there's no situation which is going to be the same. Every kid is very different. They come to you with different needs, and I
Yeah.
think you shared that with me before.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it really relies on that assessment, right? And individualizing the treatment for each child, whatever you're doing. There's not like you can't have a checklist. I mean, we have a checklist of things we look at, but man, when you start to work with a child, you really have to follow that child's lead, the family's lead, and address what is like right in front of you, really to prioritize things, I think. Yeah.
Absolutely. So you and so you had this transition where you were working, and then suddenly you read some books. That one book that you're talking about, the Last Child in the Woods, and that caused you to think different thoughts. And so you decided to move outside, uh, and you were happy outside. You blossomed outside. Did this bring you back to your childhood, or what happened when you went outside? Some people don't like to be outside.
No, that's very true. I mean, I do always say, like, it does take a special kind of, you have to be someone who wants to work outdoors with kids, right? And the outdoors is not always the place for all kids to be seen for every issue they come to for therapy. So there is that, that's the clinical reasoning piece, right? We have to use our clinical judgment to decide what is best for that child and family. Did it take me back to childhood? Well, when you just said, did it take you back to childhood? What happened? And I'm like, well, what happened was I got a really bad case of poison oak the first time I went outdoors with kids because it was winter. It was like February in California. And poison oak does not have leaves on it in winter, but the branches are very full of your erythritol, whatever the
Urushiol is
Urushiol,
urushiol.
yeah, yeah. That can really make, so I got a raging case of poison oak on my legs and learned very quickly to be more careful. So, I mean, it's a good example of how the outdoors can quickly teach us things in very real life situations that happen. But yeah, I think I just felt like kids belong outdoors, right? Like kids are freer in so many situations that we put children in nowadays. They're in this adult controlled environment. We're the ones controlling their environment. And when kids get outdoors, they kind of naturally have space to move, space to be loud. We're always telling kids, be quiet, don't move, sit still, all these things that we as adults want them to do to fit into our world, right? And I think what what just kind of brought such joy to me was seeing kids in their natural element, just be free to be themselves. I think that's like the beauty of getting kids outside is they have some of that space and freedom that they may not have in everyday situations indoors nowadays.
I take my grandchildren to parks in the neighborhood around, and
Mhm.
every time you take them to a park, it's almost like they just kind of have this moment where they just look around and kind of go, "Wow."
Yeah.
And then they just start running over across the grass. They start discovering things. They pick up things. They're that sense of freedom, which is so important and so powerful for a child to have, is so evident when you bring them outside. And I happen to be a gigantic believer outside because as a kid, uh, in living in Northern California, Laura, we had a small home. We had a 900 square foot home.
Uh-huh.
And I had four siblings, so that made five kids and two parents. And so we were all existing in this very tiny house. And the first thing I wanted to do in the morning when I got up was to get out of the house and get
Right.
outside and spend as much possible time I could outside
Yep.
as I could, as many hours as possible out in the fresh air. So I do have one question before we go on a break here. So you got poison oak. Did your patients, your children you're working with, did they get poison oak too?
None of the kids. God took care of me on that one. None of the kids got it. I
Okay.
only got it.
Yeah,
I was the
because
only one. Even my own son, who was out there with me, did not get it, and I got it. I don't know.
okay, I could just, bring your kid to OT, get poison oak. That's kind of a
Right,
bad, it's
exactly. Not good marketing.
very bad marketing. Yes, very. So that's very funny. Well, I guess you probably get a couple of mosquito bites out there, and maybe even a bee sting or two. Do those things in the elements get you ever when you're
Bee
with your?
stings, no. Mosquitoes, yes. But in Northern California, the bugs aren't so bad, really. Like, it's a pretty idyllic world in which to be outdoors most of the year, if you think about it. There's very few bugs, occasionally mosquitoes, but yeah, no. And I never got bee stings. I think we did have bee stings at summer camps once or twice, but not too bad. Like nothing. I've actually, the worst thing that's ever happened. This is probably what we should not talk about to scare parents or anything. But the worst thing that ever happened was a child was, gosh, it was a long time ago, but I think he was crossing over a creek and he fell and he broke his collarbone when
Ah,
he fell. Like he landed weird on his shoulder or something and broke his collarbone. So that was the only thing that I have ever had happen that was like emergency, right? But I also would say that that could happen anywhere, really. It's not that the outdoors is any more dangerous than an indoor setting. I
Yeah.
actually think sometimes indoor clinics might be a little more dangerous, to be honest. Maybe we can talk about that later.
Yeah, it turns out you can actually get mosquito bites inside too, right? And you can also fall down and fracture your collarbone
Sure.
in a lot of different scenarios. I see that
Yep.
pretty frequently in my patients. Okay,
Yep.
we are going to take a 1-minute break here. Friends, we're listening to Dr. Laura Park Figueroa. She's a PhD of occupational therapy. And we're talking about taking occupational therapy outside. And so, friends, we'll be right back. Don't go away.
The Hamilton Review podcast is brought to you by Hamilton Babies, 9 kid-friendly products designed for the little loves in your life. Find them at hamiltonbabies.com or amazon.com. Also consider Dr. Hamilton's recently published book, 7 Secrets of the Newborn, available at Barnes & Noble, your local independent bookstore, and amazon.com.
So, friends, welcome back to the Hamilton Review. We're continuing our conversation today with Dr. Laura Park Figueroa. She's a PhD in occupational therapy. So, Laura, we've talked about the idea that you have brought OT from the inside of a building to the great outdoors. I know we talked about the fact that you actually go to public parks, right? Is that where you mainly go? Is it the same park all the time, or you have different parks?
We use a couple of different local parks in the area around Berkeley and Oakland.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, one immediate benefit I see is that you're not paying rent.
Yeah, we do pay permit fees.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
and sometimes those can be for summer camps, those can be really expensive, like thousands of dollars in the Bay Area. But in general, yes, the rates are much lower than we would renting indoor space in the Bay Area of California. So, yeah, it does save money.
It does save money, which is wonderful. So we can kind of start with that. I'm not surprised, I guess, that permit fees definitely in the San Francisco area would probably be pretty intense, but that's another conversation. So, question I have though is you're bringing kids from the inside to the outside world. I love that idea, but have you seen a benefit? Have you seen the reason why people bring their children to you is because they have an issue that they're asking for help on, whatever, and you kind of outlet, you had the outline of the range of things that which you deal with, which is really quite vast. So, have you seen a benefit to kids? Do they get better quicker? Do you think that it is more holistic for them to be outside than inside? Can you speak to that issue?
Yeah. So I think, again, I mentioned this a few minutes ago, but as therapists, we want to be very intentional about where we see a child for therapy, right? So there is some clinical reasoning that goes into what are the things that are best worked on outdoors in the nature environment. So in my practice, what we found pretty early on, and we kind of developed our tagline for the business for Outdoor Kids OT from the types of challenges that we were seeing in the children that we worked with, that we found them making the greatest progress in. So we say we help kids grow more coordinated, confident, calm, and caring. And those kind of 4 areas are coordination. So the outdoor environment offers this uneven terrain. We're moving a ton more in an outdoor session than we would indoors. And there is some research behind that, not in my practice that I have done, but just in the existing literature on nature and children, that on a natural playground, children tend to move more. So that is something where when we come from a motor learning perspective, kids need a lot of repetition to learn motor skills, right? So in the outdoor environment, that is something that we see gains in very quickly, is that children gain better coordination outdoors. So coordination, confidence. A lot of kids come to us and they're just very hesitant and scared. They may have some sensory processing challenges where they're afraid to touch things. They're very hesitant in their body. They're not aware of where their body is in space. And so we see kids grow this confidence outdoors because they're immersed in this multisensory environment, versus in an indoor setting in OT, Now I'm probably calling myself out here, okay? But I used to make jokes about how we did this thing in indoor settings a lot of times in a clinic, and OT will have like a very big box, right? That they put a bunch of some kind of sensory material in, like dry beans or rice or something like that. And I used to just be like, oh, just this sticking our hands in some beans is not doing what I wanted to do, right? Because it's such a out of context experience for kids. And it's fine. If kids like that multisensory play, that's fine. But it's not kind of as natural as the full immersion into a multisensory environment that the outdoor setting is. And so with kids that lack that confidence and that have those sensory processing challenges, that is the one area where it is so incredible. OTs say it all the time, like, oh my gosh, like within 3 sessions, he was totally putting his hands in the mud, when the first session he would cry to get dirty, right? So we see confidence improving in things like sensory processing disorder and like tactile processing. Coordinated, confident, calm. So kids that are really hyperactive, there's a lot of research around kids who have ADHD being calmed by outdoor settings, loads of research around that. So that's an area that we see too, where kids kind of, the outdoor environment helps them naturally self-regulate. It helps their brain kind of calm down and have this like kind of a flow state, where they're in this state of flow and play,
Yeah.
and they're not having to use their frontal lobe so much. Their brain gets to rest a little bit. And then the last one is caring. And that is about building friendships and having empathy towards others. And a lot of the kids that come to us have challenges with social skills. And so when we get multiple kids together in this outdoor environment where they have that freedom that I spoke about to kind of be themselves, the therapist can then kind of come alongside and support the development of those social relationships. So those are kind of the 4 areas that I think in my practice, we've seen the most kind of astounding results with, really.
So you have developed this this idea of what you call contigo, which is connection, transformation in the great outdoors. So
Yeah.
I like that. I like this little idea. Can you walk us through this little acronym?
Yeah, so I developed it because when I started my practice, I really wanted to make sure that the other therapists and I were all in agreement about what are we all doing out here? Like, how can we still be creative and be ourselves as therapists, but be guided by evidence in order to do what is best for children when we do our outdoor sessions. So I sort of created it to use internally, and then it became something that I started teaching other people. So connection stands for, or the C stands for connection. And this comes from the idea that in a nature-based session, when you use the Contigo approach as a therapist, you would never have just the therapist with the child. This is the foundation to all of our work, is connection and human relationships. Relationship-based approaches are huge in therapeutic settings with children right now. And it makes sense because from an evolutionary perspective, we as humans are not meant to be by ourselves, right? So the problem that I was seeing is that in a lot of OT settings, schools, clinics, outpatient clinics, things like that, a lot of times the therapist was seeing the child with just the 2 of them, right?
Sure,
The parent would
sure.
wait in the waiting room,
Yep.
or maybe the parent's there, but they're not actively involved in the session. Or there's not peers in the session. There's nobody in the session except the child and the therapist. So that was the first thing that I was like, okay, in our practice, we're always going to have a family member or a sibling, or I guess that would be a family member, a parent or a sibling or a caregiver, or peers in the sessions together to do our groups, so that the child kind of it makes it more playful, right? It makes it more fun for the child.
Sure.
So that's the connection piece. Transformation refers to looking at evidence and doing what evidence says we should be doing in our sessions with children. So that transformation piece in the Contigo approach means pulling from like outdoor literature, like that exists in the education and psychology spaces mostly, and pulling from your own profession's literature. For me, it would be OT, might be physical therapy, speech therapy, mental health, and using both of those together to create what you're going to do in that session so that it's based on evidence. And then in the great outdoors is pretty self-explanatory. But in the Contigo approach, specifically, the great outdoors refers to using a natural space that is away from the built environment. So this is not to say that all kinds of nature-based therapy need to happen like away from a playground or away from a sports field or anything like that. But there is research that indicates that natural spaces where we don't see houses, we don't see cars, we don't see roads, we don't see built things like a playground or a sports field, those natural spaces really help to calm our nervous systems. We feel this sense of being away. This is Kaplan, and Kaplan created a theory called attention restoration theory in the 80s, I believe. And it refers to that idea of nature being very calming for our minds and letting us rest our attention. And so that's the in the great outdoors piece in the Contigo approach refers to using a setting that would kind of feel away to the child to foster that sense of excitement and adventure and exploration a little bit.
As a kid, I used to walk in the woods a lot, and I sometimes would just go down there by myself, and there was acres of open country,
Yeah.
really, and listen to the wind in the trees. I would remember looking at birds and watching them and just kind of thinking, and it was actually a really, I look at those times in my life, and I was a kid. I was a young kid doing this, and you're completely correct that those kind of experiences where, young people can go into areas where they can't see anything built. There's nothing that they see,
Yeah.
which is just wild country, is refreshing. And even to this day, I find that just being in the country, taking a hike is so wonderful and so beautiful. And obviously, this is what you're trying to get at. Can you give us some ideas about what kind of things you do? Okay, so you have a kid who's coming to you who has an issue with, just say, of coordination. They can't. They're not as, they don't have the fine motor coordination that parents.
Sure.
They're not feeding themselves, or they're not doing things. They can't write with a pencil, for example. That's a classic OT kind of problem.
Yeah, right.
How do you deal with that outside?
Yeah, so it would kind of depend on how you were seeing them. So for a kid like that in a group setting, we would be planning group activities that would get that child doing those things in some way that is playful, like part of the activity. So it could be that they have to do some writing because we're writing clues for a scavenger hunt, or it could be that they have to do some writing because they're checking off, we're grading to wherever the child is. Maybe they can't write sentences yet, right? Checking off a list maybe of things that we find, but we're doing it in the context of play. So the Contigo approach that I developed is not a sit down at a table and do XYZ kind of thing, right? It's very geared toward whatever the child needs. So for fine motor skills for a child, we might do activities where they have to write in some playful way. They might be drawing something they see outside. They might be using scissors to clip like flowers, or to clip leaves, or to cut up leaves into leaf confetti. That's a really fun thing to do, leaf confetti. You chop up all the leaves and then you throw them in the air, and it's like no mess confetti. You just leave it when you're done. It's very fun. Kids love it. So things like that where they would have to use the fine motor skills, but in the context of something fun that we're doing in the session. One of the things we often do with our groups in my practice is to offer some type of healthy snack. And so the kids will often help prepare that. And that's where we get work on some of those fine motor skills too, where we're using tools. And the apple peeler is the favorite thing of all time. If you are a parent and listening to this, go to Amazon and look up, I think it's called Johnny Apple Peeler. It's an old-fashioned heavy cast iron apple peeler that you put an apple on, and the child has to hold it and turn this kind of rotating handle.
Yeah.
Kids love it. It peels the apple and then slices it at the same time. It is such a motivating, fun thing to do. Not naturey really, but like just a very fun. One of the things I love to do in my approach is to use old-fashioned things, like an old-fashioned apple peeler, the things that kids don't see anymore. They don't see these things anymore in daily life, so it's kind of novel and exciting to them. So using novelty is a big piece of working outdoors with kids.
It's a great idea. I have to find myself a Johnny Apple Peeler. Is that the name of it? A Johnny Apple
Yeah,
Peeler?
I think it's called the Johnny Apple Peeler. It's red and it's like heavy. It'll have like 25,000 5-star reviews probably on Amazon. It's affordable. I think it's like $20, $30 maybe. But we use it. It slices and peels at the same time. And if you make apple pie or apple crisp or anything, I mean, it is really a fun tool to use too, even for adults. Can you hear how much I love it?
No,
when
I can.
I'm talking about it, it's really fun.
I wish everyone could see the glow on your face right
Yeah.
now. You're just getting it. So, okay, now I have a gift from my wife for the anniversary. So that's
there
good.
you go.
Yeah, I'm sure she'll appreciate that.
Yeah, right.
So, this idea is beginning to take off a little bit. You're developing some following there in the Berkeley area. Is this going beyond your group? I mean, other people picking up this idea and taking and doing it as well?
Yeah. So I ran in 2019. I ran the first Contigo Approach training in November of 2019. So 4 months before the world shut down, and
Bad
from
timing.
there,
Bad timing, dear. By the way.
Yeah. Well, actually, it was really beautiful. The weather, we had it in Santa Cruz, California, so it was really beautiful weather in November there, and it was such a wonderful experience. We had 27 people. I remember mailing the check for the retreat center, being afraid that I might just be out like $5,000 or whatever I had to put down. I don't remember even now, but it was a significant amount of money at the time to me and my business, because I was putting the money down, but not knowing if people were going to sign up. And I had 27 people that came and paid to be at the training. So after COVID hit, we ended up making it into an online course. And so as of today, over 100 people have taken the course, and they're all over the world. So Australia, New Zealand, Argentina, mostly in the US, Canada, Alaska. There's people doing nature-based OT in Alaska, of all places. I mean, I think I wrote it at some point, and I wrote, yes, you read that right. She's in Alaska, so I've had 3 people, I think, from Alaska actually take the course. So lots of people all over are doing this work. I don't want people to think that you have to have nice weather in order to do it, right?
Yeah.
You can be outdoors in all kinds of weather with the right gear and right preparation. So yeah, so it's kind of taken off, and now I do the online course, and I also do business coaching to help the therapists start set up and run their practices effectively as well. So we have an online community called Therapy in the Great Outdoors. It's free for people to be members of the discussion area and the member directory. They can kind of go there and see what other therapists are sharing. And then we have some very low cost, like for $7 a month, you can join our monthly calls and things like that. And then also my business coaching program in there, which is obviously it's a year-long program. It's more expensive, but so yeah, the work has kind of grown, and it's just such a joy to watch people do this work. And I just filed paperwork yesterday to start a nonprofit to raise money to scholarship children at all of these nature-based practices that I know of, because one of the challenges is that many of these nature-based practices are offering service on a cash pay model because insurance doesn't reimburse enough. And there's a lot of limitations when you use insurance, which I'm sure being a pediatrician.
Sure
So
do.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I just wanted a way to be able to raise money in order to give scholarships for children to attend nature-based therapy. So that is coming hopefully in about a year. I think maybe it'll take to get everything set up, and then to fundraise after that, maybe a little longer. But I'm just really, I'm really reinvigorated with love for my work. Once I filed that paperwork, it was on my after the PhD list. Like after the PhD, I'm going to start a nonprofit, so I'm just really excited about it because I think it's going to expand access even further than just even training the therapist. So
good for you, Laura. You've got a lot of energy, and I love your passion for what you're doing. I'm curious, in terms of kids who have ADHD or who have autism. I know you work with some of these kids. What do you see when you take these kids out into the country, into the open spaces?
Yeah, just out into nature. I mean, it goes back to what I just said. They're just free to be themselves. I feel like they feel this freedom that they don't feel in daily life. And kids need that so badly right now. So I also want to say though, I wouldn't say that nature is a panacea. This is actually something that I get on a soapbox about often on social media. It's like I don't like when anyone anyone kind of paints nature as this panacea that fixes all things, right? It doesn't fix everything, and that's not really our job as therapists to fix kids anyway, right? But it's not like a magic bullet, okay?
Yeah.
It is magical in many ways, but it's not a magic bullet or a magic pill in some way. Um, the therapist's skill is also really important in nature-based therapy work, right? So many of the memories that I have that are most poignant of specifically a couple of kids that I had who probably had both ADHD and autism diagnoses, um, are the more challenging times that we had, right? Like they're not these idyllic moments where we're all next to, I mean, they are, those memories are there too, right? But they're moments when things were really challenging, like when a kid slipped and fell and got really muddy, and I had to support him through the feelings, right? And like, what are we going to do about it? And problem solving, like these natural things that come up in nature are the exact opportunities that we have to problem solve, to adapt, to learn, to grow and change. So, um, other things that have happened too, where there was a group I ran for a really long time where two children in that group just really were like oil and vinegar. They just did not mesh, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and they never, it was never dangerous or anything, but it was just challenging for them to always kind of be bickering. And but that's real life. That's real life, right? That was what my research found, was this idea of my research with nature-based OTs, like looking at what OTs are doing in nature. This idea of braving real life challenges. That's the power of nature-based therapy, is that in an indoor setting where we are controlling, the therapist is like, the job really of the therapist is to control that environment, to give the child this like optimal ideal experience, right? So that they're always successful and never experiencing failure. And actually in nature-based work, it kind of flips that on its head and says, no, actually, the benefit is in failure. The benefit is in the real life challenges that come up that make us really uncomfortable sometimes, like a kid that we can't get along with, or getting muddy, or slipping and skinning our knee, or a bee stinging, well, whatever the things are that we've talked about, maybe some of the quote unquote negatives are actually some of the things that facilitate the child being able to adapt and grow and change. And that's what we want in therapy, is kids to develop that inner ability to adapt.
Yeah.
So
No,
yeah.
I can see that. That's exactly what we're trying to do. The parents, what are the parents? Are they embracing this as well? I can see how the kids would love
Oh,
it, because the kids love to be outdoors, and it would be like a breath of fresh air for them. Parents, are they on board as well?
yeah. Well, it's funny because I think that it's like, it's almost like the question of like, what came first, the chicken or the egg? Like, so it's kind of like the parents that come to a nature-based practice and enroll their child in a nature-based practice are probably the type of parents that value the outdoors anyway. And so I think that's one of the reasons I want to get into kind of doing nonprofit work, is to kind of make this broader than just the people who like the outdoors, and to even encourage the families that may not call themselves quote outdoorsy people, right? That's my sister. My sister lets me take her kids outdoors. She does not she does not like to go outdoors with them. We're about as different as we can be, even though we're best friends. She's a hairstylist and I'm like a nature OT. So but really, like, even if parents don't want to get outdoors with their kids, I want them to hear the message of like, you can still, it's simple. It doesn't have to be like out in the woods, deep in the back country, in the mountains, at the beach. Well, who doesn't like the beach? Most parents like the beach, but you don't have to be in these wild nature settings. Even just going on a simple walk with your kid outdoors and noticing things, stopping and noticing.
Yeah.
Don't have an agenda, just stop and notice the wind, notice the leaves on the tree, notice the birds chirping, notice the worms on the ground after it rains. Noticing is huge. And I think that's like such a simple thing that we don't stop to do nowadays. So yeah, parents love it, but also the parents that come to us are probably the ones that
you're
that love it anyway, right?
Self-selecting is what you're doing. So
Yeah.
are the sessions longer than traditional sessions? Because you're getting out to the country, it's gonna take a time to get out there. Do you meet them at the playground, or do you drive there in a bus, or what do you do?
Yeah, so that is actually one of the elements of the Contigo approach, is that we do longer sessions than just usually most OT sessions in a clinic are like 45 minutes to maybe an hour, 45 to 50 minutes usually. And our sessions are 90 minutes long, sometimes even 2 hours. Like our Saturday groups go a little bit longer because they meet less times during the year. Our summer camps are 4 hours a day. So definitely that time is needed too. And this is, I feel like kids need the time to kind of get into being able to play too. They need that time and space, that freedom. We keep coming back to that word freedom, or I do, but
no, it's a great word. I love that word.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I can see how it would just kind of take a minute or two for kids just to kind of get into the program. You just can't, a 45-minute session in a building, in a room, would be a very different dynamic. The kids want to get done with it. Outdoors, right. They probably don't want to get done with it. They're probably having a great time, so they're enjoying. Yeah. Actually, you're making it from a tedious endeavor to actually a delightful endeavor to just be outside and play with their friends. Really, it's more almost like play therapy in many ways. Yeah. Well, listen, Laura, I love your energy. I love what you're doing, because you're doing a good thing. You're helping a lot of people, and my hats off to you for this pretty novel idea. And I'm very happy to hear that it's growing internationally. You're doing it, and I'm happy for you. I can see that you're smiling, and it makes me smile. Yeah, I'm excited. Too. So, how do people find you, Dr. Laura Park Figueroa?
It still sounds so funny to hear doctor. I can't get over it. Every time you've said it, I'm like, wait, it is true. Okay, I'm done. I'm totally done with that degree. Okay, so I hang out on Instagram. That is where I tend to share a lot of content there. I'm at Laura Park Fig, Laura Park Fig. And you can also find me on Facebook at Therapy in the Great Outdoors. My practice is Outdoor Kids OT, also on Facebook. Outdoor Kids OT is on Instagram too, so you can follow there. I share on my Laura Park Fig account on Instagram, I share a little bit more about like theory. I share about business a little bit, like how to run a practice. On my Outdoor Kids OT, my practice, my business, my private practice OT account at Outdoor Kids OT, you'll get more like activities and peeks into our groups, what our groups look like, our services. And then if anyone listening is a therapist, I know we probably have a lot of parents listening, and I hope they gain value. But if anyone is a therapist or wants to send this info along to a therapist, they can go to therapyinthegreatoutdoors.com, and that has like it's the central hub for all the resources I have for nature-based pediatric therapists of all kinds, not just OTs, but PTs, speech therapists, mental health counselors. We want anyone who works with children to come on over there and make use of those resources to get outside with kids.
That's great. So it's called therapyinthegreatoutdoors.com. Yep. Beautiful. Okay. Well, listen, Laura, we're going to wrap it up right there. I want to thank you for your precious time. You've been a great guest on the show. So thank you, Laura.
Thank you so much. I loved our conversation. It was really fun to talk about this.
It was, and you're great, by the way. So friends, you have been listening to the Hamilton Review, where kids and culture collide. We have had a great conversation with Dr. Laura Park Figueroa, who's got a lot of ideas, and the big idea she's been doing for the last several years is taking kids outside to do occupational therapy, and great success in that. So I'm really, really proud of you, Laura. So friends, until next time, be well. Bye-bye.
You have been listening to the Hamilton Review, where kids and culture collide. Thank you for allowing us to be a part of your day. Tune in again next week on Apple Podcast. Rate and comment and tell a friend.